The only thing that's mythical or epic in the Rings of Power is its failure. Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Finally we have the release of the Rings of Power, and as you would expect, the reactions are out there all over the place and you can find them pretty much everywhere. We have got the positive reviews, mostly positive reviews of course, from the media, all those people, the shills and those that support this thing, that say, well, the thing is great, the acting is superb, music is fantastic, special effects, even the costumes, right? When we know that we had there also a bit of spraying and printing, on materials that are not really armor or anything like that, but anyways, we also had some negative comments. And as you saw also at the beginning of this video, there was this reaction on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, you know that I don't use that shite site here, but I just wanted to draw attention to some of the things that people are saying over there. So we are going to go little by little. We are going to be talking about what the mass media, all those outlets out there are saying about the Rings of Power. Also considering those negative reviews, because there were some negative reviews, and we are going to also delve into what some of the audience is saying over at Rotten Tomatoes. The opinions. I'm not going to look at the scores. I don't care about that. I don't give a shite about that, but about people's opinions. So without further ado, let's dive into that. Different sites, like The Guardian for example, called it astounding, and it makes the House of the Dragon look amateur. Now let me stop you right there, and I have to say something about this show in particular, The House of the Dragon, because if you really pay attention to how this is getting produced, there is a certain level of quality downgrade in it, if you pay attention to some Game of Thrones early seasons, you will find that the costumes were better created and the wigs were also of a better quality. Now, the costumes might retain a certain level, a certain standard of quality, that is true, but if you look at the wigs that everyone is using, that everyone is wearing right now for this show to look like the Targaryen clan and all that, well, you would pay attention to a little fact, and that is that the quality has been downgraded quite dramatically, and that is setting the bar too low for the Rings of Power. And even that is not really to the level, because if you listen to what other people have been saying, they have complained that this looks even cheaper than House of the Dragon. So I don't reckon that is exactly quite what it is actually out there, and I reckon that it's more about this being a total lack of quality show. And considering that they spent close to $1 billion for this thing, you would have expected at least that they would have a certain level of quality, but they don't, right? Other sites, for instance, call this show dazzling, like the BBC. They say that it's a dazzling show. Others say that it's a fantasy hit, like Bloomberg. I think that also Games Radar called it a cinematic masterpiece, something like that. I think that it was also The Wire that called it a wonderful piece of work. But as you will pretty soon see, not everyone that works out there in the industry agrees with these usual shilling media sites. Not even one of the closest promoters of this thing, that is Entertainment Weekly. We are going to take a look into that right now. Entertainment Weekly's review reads, quote, "There are ways to do a prequel, and The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power does them all wrong. It takes 6 or 7 things everyone remembers from the famous movie trilogy, adds a water tank, makes nobody fun, teases mysteries that aren't mysteries, and sends the best character on a pointless detour," end quote. And Entertainment Weekly is referring here, at least in their opinion, to Galadriel, who is the only character in this show who believes that Sauron is coming back, that he has never really in fact left. And it's like that story of the little piggies, that don't believe that the wolf is coming around, and they build their houses with soft materials until it does come out, and they have to take refuge in the Sterner home, and it's pretty much the same old thing. So then Galadriel is going to be here, warning everyone, "Oh, people, it's coming, Sauron is out there, Sauron is not gone, let's fight him," and then everyone is going to be like, "It'll be fine, don't worry about it." And that, in the case of Entertainment Weekly, is a weak spot here, which would also be according to what Randolph said about Galadriel being like Morvid Clark being not the best suited actor for this thing. And if you think that that is putting all things mildly, just look at what Christopher Stevens at the Daily Mail had to say. Quote, Christopher Stevens reviews The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. "No turkey, however bloated and stupid, could ever be big enough to convey the mesmerizing awfulness of Amazon's billion-dollar Tolkien epic." End quote. Ouch, right? The article reads, quote, "The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power is so staggeringly bad it's hilarious. Everything about it is ill-judged to a spectacular extreme. The cliché Latin script, the dire acting, the Latin pace, the sheer inconsistency and confusion as it lurches between styles. Where do we start?" So, dire acting. Once again, we have here a review that says, well, the acting is not that good, right? And even though he asks where to start, well, he will begin with how big this production was, with close to $1 billion, and making use of 250 million just to secure the rights doesn't seem like a sure bet, right? When you consider that what you have spent does not translate to the quality that not only were fans expecting, but that you should also be trying to offer as a reputable streaming service, considering also what others have tried to do. And even though they also have terrible productions, whether you are talking about the Netflix productions or the poor quality of the Marvel shows on Disney Plus that are subpar to what we see in most of the films, they still try to hold a certain standard that it seems to be completely lost here in this attempt. Now, of course, the article talks about how magnificent the visuals are, but how meaningless they become if nobody knows what is meant for this thing to do, because apparently nobody has any idea who they are trying to get with this show. And the article says so in this way, quote, "But magnificent visuals are meaningless if nobody knows who the audience is meant to be, and it's impossible to guess whether The Rings of Power is meant for children, for hardcore fans, or for general viewers, because it fails them all," end quote. And to provide some examples, he talks about the gory bits out there in some of the scenes involving Bronwyn and how she defeats an enemy in a very, as I said, gory way, how it is trying to win children's hearts by presenting Harfoots, in this light and innocent way, but at the same time trying to attract also the general public with some incredible feats like that Galadriel that we saw in some of the trailers and in some of the bits in which she's jumping and performing some acrobatics for the sake of it and all that. Well, that's the thing here, that this thing in general and as a whole is not really trying to determine who the audience for this is. They just go with, oh, well, we need a large audience, a massive audience. This has to be a massive hit. Otherwise, we are going to fail and we are not going to continue as a streaming site or something like that. And Stevens here mentions that the show, so far in the 2 episodes that you could see, feels disconnected, and of course it is disjointed because they don't even know what they are trying to tell you, what they are trying to give you. And if you consider as well that J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay have no idea whatsoever and no experience in doing something of this amount of responsibility and also work and all that, if they have no experience in this, of course it's going to be terrible. Of course it's going to be a disaster. But we already have the opinions from some of these people that work for this sort of thing, for reviews. Let's dive into what some people have to say over at Rotten Tomatoes that are regular viewers. On Rotten Tomatoes, you've got also fan reactions, and they are not pretty. They are not nice at all with the Rings of Power. And once again, I do not want to use Rotten Tomatoes for measuring scores. What I want to look at are the reviews that people leave. And as you can see right now on the screen, all these people, they've got something in common. That this is boring, it's uninspiring, and even though some people that reviewed this and said, yeah, it's boring by now, are waiting for it or saying, well, I am going to give it another go and see if it improves from here on out. In reality, most of the comments are about how this show is uninspiring, boring, and completely ignoring Tolkien in every single point and at every turn that it takes. Which means, of course, that the show is not what people were expecting, it is not what people wanted, and of course it also means that the Rings of Power seems to be destroyed, dead on arrival, and we can only be happy that that is the case for this terrible show. But of course, those are only my Viking views. Let me know your opinion down below in the comments. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.